Hi everyone, my name's Ryan H. Lewis, and today we are going to do a pretty cool tutorial. We're going to look at how to automate navigating the web, surfing the web on AWS. We're going to build a very simple app that is going to go to a page, pull some things off that page and return it. And we're going to run all of that on an AWS Lambda function. And we are going to do it from scratch. This is going to be a full tutorial. We are going to make the directory, install the dependencies, write the code, deploy it, and test it, and everything. So we've got a lot to get into, so let's jump to the video. All right, so here we are, and I've got kind of everything open that we need to have. So let's start off and make our directory. I'm calling it Surfing Lambda, but I've already made that to test this out before, so we'll call it the Surfing Lambda Actual, which is a good name. So with Lambda functions, I really like to use what's called the serverless framework. It simplifies development and deployment of Lambda functions and really a lot of other things. If I'm building an application that has anything to do with serverless and anything to do with Lambda functions, I almost always use the serverless framework. So let me show you how this works. So I'll run the serverless command line, which I've already pre-installed. It's going to kind of build out the scaffolding in this directory for a node project. It'll have some defaults and some boilerplate and things like that. So let's see what this looks like now that we have created that. So it creates a get-ignore, very important, a handler function, which I'm going to blow away because they use semicolons. That's not the only reason. And then a serverless YAML file, which is really kind of everything we need to. So let's do a npm init -y to get our npm ready to install things. And then I'm going to want to install serverless locally. Let's see. -d serverless. And let's see, what else do we need? We need Puppeteer. The other things we need should not be dev dependencies. So let's pull this down. And there we go. Okay. So then we need, let's see, we need Chrome AWS Lambda. So this is what is going to enable us to access Chrome on our Lambda function, which is pretty cool. And then we need Puppeteer. Now with this, I believe we're using Puppeteer Core, which doesn't include everything. Puppeteer is kind of the way that we can access a Chrome browser programmatically in our JavaScript and do things with it. So here we are, and we've got our dependencies installed. Chrome. What did I do wrong? Why is this here? Oh, I think I did lowercase d. Okay, that's fine. And then, I've got this, I've got the test project here. I'm gonna just double check that I've got the dependencies right. Yeah, Puppeteer, Core, and serverless. Yeah, so that's good. It shouldn't do anything to have this here. I don't think so. Okay, so let's start with our serverless YAML. And let's look at the things that we actually need. Now, when serverless breaks out this boilerplate, it's actually really nice because it has all the pieces that you would need. And so you can kind of keep what you need, customize what you would want to have in your thing, and then just delete the things that you won't necessarily need. We don't really need any package information, any IAM roles, anything special anyways. We are gonna run this off of API gateway, so we do want to keep the events here, but we don't need all these events. We don't even really need environment variables or anything like that. You could use them for this project, but I don't know. I'm putting it in code. So first of all, let's change our function name. So this is going to be the things we'll be focusing on in this tutorial are things that you can expand on and do almost anything with. But we are going to pull headlines from news sites. I just thought that was a normal thing that you could do. It's nothing too crazy. So I'll call it headline. I'll put in my source folder, and I'll have a headline file, and we'll call it .get. And then basically for our path, I'll say it's headline, and then I want to be able to specify which outlet we're getting the headline from. So I'm going to create a parameter, putting it in curly quotes in curly braces, and the serverless YAML file will create it as a parameter, which you can pull down, and we can customize that. There's a couple other things with this function. So first of all, it needs a lot more memory than it gets by default. So you can customize the memory, and by like relative increase, you also get more CPUs. Obviously, if you're running Chrome on a Lambda function, it needs some like resources to be able to do that. I actually quit running Chrome because it ate all of the RAM on my laptop. But if you're still running Chrome, you probably know that when you get a lot of tabs open, it starts to kill your memory. So we won't have a lot of tabs open in this Lambda. We won't have any tabs open, but we do need some. And also it takes some time. It's gonna have to boot up Chrome, a version of Chromium, and run and actually go to the browser. So it's a little bit of a different kind of experience than just very quick API call. So we do need a higher timeout. I set this to 60 seconds. It never takes 60 seconds, but 60 is plenty for my Lambda to run. So here we've got everything pretty much set up in the serverless YAML. We've got it's going to be running node 12. It's going to AWS. I'm going to be using the region and the default credentials that I already have loaded into my AWS CLI. That's what the serverless framework uses. So if you don't have that set up and you're following along, you need to get your AWS CLI set up. But then basically we're just going to have one function. It's going to set this up on an API gateway with headline with a parameter using the get HTTP method. We've got our resources. We will need to create this handler file. That doesn't exist right now. But other than that, everything is ready to go with the serverless YAML file. So let's create a new folder here called source. It's nice. I always like keeping my actual code that does things in its own folder. It just makes it a lot cleaner at the root of the project. So that's why I put it in the source folder. And then we'll call this headline.js. So let's see, we are going to export one function. I believe I called it get. Yes, I called it get. It's going to just be an async function, and it is going to use the event. The event is where the path parameters are at, so it will use that for sure. And it does have one dependency, and that is the Chromium browser. Oh, I murdered that, didn't I? All right, so this is going to be Chromium. It's also going to, because of this Chrome, how this Chrome AWS Lambda project works, it's actually going to have Puppeteer like built in with it. So we don't have to depend on Puppeteer or anything here. So let's see. Let's look at this, Chrome AWS Lambda. So this is a project that basically is set up to pull Chrome on your Lambda and use Puppeteer to build it. So let's actually copy some of this boilerplate. Not all of it, but let's copy some. Simply because I don't remember all of this stuff. Like when you're creating the browser, you have to pass in all these args and stuff like that. I don't remember any of that stuff. But what we're gonna do, all right. So we will need to, I don't know that we'll need this result, and I don't think we'll actually even need the browser out there. So one piece about this, it says to actually close the browser, like to close it on your Lambda function. I don't really see the point of that. I mean, there's not really, normally you do these kinds of things, these kind of connections to avoid memory leaks, but there's not really any way you can leak memory on a Lambda that I know of. So I'm going to get rid of that. First thing we need to do is get the outlet out of the event. So we'll do event, and then it's path parameters, and outlet is what we called it. So this should match this property on path parameters. That's how you get that. And then I'm going to get the outlet info. So what I really want to do is basically for outlet, I'm going to be able to say something like NYT or WP and be able to know a couple of things. One, when I say NYT, I mean New York Times, and I need two pieces of information out of that. I need the URL to go to in Chromium Puppeteer. And then I also need the element where the headline is. And so I'm not trying to get the page title. I'm actually trying to get the headline, or what New York Times considers a headline. So because we're using Puppeteer, and this is kind of the nature of, you could call it web scraping or surfing the web. That's what I love. You kind of need to understand the nature of the page, the elements, and these elements may change and they may change at with no notice. So unfortunately, it's just kind of the nature of the beast when you're dealing with this kind of things. So I want to say get outlet info and pass in the outlet. So this is a function that does not exist yet. I'm going to build it here. And it'll take the outlet, and it's just going to run a switch on that outlet. And we're going to set up a couple of cases, and they'll just return a bunch of stuff. So if we say NYT, it'll return the URL, and it'll also return the tag. This is a selector. This is how you can select the headline out of here. So then we'll do Washington Post as well. You can put whatever news organizations you like in here. So we'll say it's WashingtonPost.com and tag. I'm leaving the tags empty because I'm going to show you how to get them. You could put a default case in here. We don't need to put breaks because we're returning, so it automatically exits out of the switch. So let's look at one of these. Okay, so here's New York Times. It's a big unicorn thing. Okay, so this right here is where they put their headline. This is essentially kind of the biggest story of the day or at the moment, whatever. And so what we really want, I want to figure out what is that headline. I'm trying to zoom this in. We don't really need styles. So here is the actual content, Moderna to seek emergency FDA approval. And you can see that span actually has a class associated to it. Now that class, balanced headline, could talk to a lot of different things. So oh gosh, this is fun. So hopefully you can see this even though they've got something running. So if I select unbalanced headline, what I really want to see here is how many elements are returned, and it looks like just one, and it has the headline that I want. So it appears that I can safely say that this .balanced headline is my tag selector that I can use, which is cool. So we'll do the same thing with Washington Post. Oh boy. Oh, I forgot to connect my internet. Yay. Funny how New York Times still worked and Washington Post immediately died. So that's too bad. Okay, so Washington Post, is, I'm going to assume that this is the headline there. What did I do? Open a new tab. See, no internet, and it just frazzles me. Okay, so their span here doesn't have a selector. Obviously, you, let me zoom in a bit. Obviously, you can't just say select on a span because there's probably tons of spans. There's also a link above it, which you don't want to get in your content. But then we've got this class right here, font headline. I'm going to guess that this is a class that applies a font to whatever the headline should be. And I'm going to guess that we can use that. So font headline. Okay, looks like it gets a H2 element with that span. So instead, if we add in that span, boom, we get the tag headline, which is exactly what we want. So we'll go in here and we will put that same value, font headline span. And so when Puppeteer is pulling things out of the page, it's going to use that tag. So now we get the outlet info. So this is all the information we need to be able to go to the page and pull the information off the page and return it. So let's see here, we're pulling in a page, turn that into const because we're not going to be reassigning it. It is going to go to a place. So that is going to be our outletinfo.url. So this will be the URL that's pulled from the function on line 26. And then after we go to that page, we don't need the title, so we can get rid of that. And we will write our own custom error handler. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. So we will say this is an async function. So whatever we return, it's returning a promise. It'll resolve that. So this is way easier than having to write the callbacks and navigating that kind of callback hell, if you will. For here, we'll say status code is 502 if we get an error, and the body will be the stringify the error that exists. We'll also print it to the console. So we'll have it in our logs in case we need it, which is nice. Okay, so once we go to the page, what do we want to do? We want to select the element. So we will say our element is, we're going to await the selecting of this. And it's use the $ selector. And here we can use outletinfo.tag. So again, this is a custom tag per page. If you wanted to add outlets, you could do that below. And once we have the element, now this is one of the, I would say, quirks of Puppeteer, which actually I really like. I really like Puppeteer, but it does have a few quirks. So on the page, when you select something on the page, this is the documentation, we pass it in. It does return a promise, which is why we can wait on it, but then it returns an element handle. This isn't like a DOM element. This is an element handle. This is kind of a custom Puppeteer thing. And so what we really, once we get the element, once it selects the correct element, we want to get the text of that element. We want to get the text content, but we can't just say element.text content. We need to use something different, which is get property. So we will say headline equals await, because again, we have to await pretty much on everything. This makes sure that if there's loading or things involved, that that's taken care of by Puppeteer. So we'll say el get property, and text content is what we'll want to get off there. Cool. So this is basically getting the property of text content off the EL. However, one thing you'll notice if you look here on get property is it also doesn't return kind of what you want. It returns a JS handle, which is represents an in-page JavaScript object. So we have to go one level deeper. I know this gets a little crazy. We want the JSON value. It basically is going to take our text content and just turn it into a string, which is a lot to do. But here's what we have to do. So we will wrap this in quotes. Why? Because we want to await on the get property call. Then we'll get a JS handle back, and then we want to call JSON value onto that because that's this JSON value function. And then we have to await on that as well. But then finally, after 2 await calls, maybe 3 await calls if you include the selector, we get to the headline, which is great. So basically, once we have that, then we can return it. We'll say return, and the status code for that is going to be 200, and then the body for that return is going to be JSON stringify. Even though it's a string, it's always good to kind of pass in JSON stringify, because if it's just an object, this thing is going to blow up. Yeah, I think that's it. Isn't that cool? So let's try this. Let's try deploying this and see how it goes. So serverless, this SLS is a shorthand for serverless, but serverless deploy should handle all of our stuff. So it's gonna package the server. It's going to package the service. It's going to take all the information that we have and package it all together, which includes zipping it. Function headline has a timeout of 60 seconds. It's got some helpful information. So API gateway automatically has a timeout of 30 seconds. Okay, didn't know that. Should have known that. It also excludes your development dependencies. So I'm a little nervous with this on serverless being in these dependencies. Hopefully it's smart enough to understand that I don't need serverless on my Lambda, but if it does, the problem is that when it packages all together, that zip file may be too big for Lambda. In this case, it's 80 megabytes, but it was deploying before, and the Lambda upload limit is 50 megabytes, so I'm not actually sure what this is calculating and how that's working. But just to go through this again, it creates a stack using CloudFormation, and then once the initial stack, like the Lambda and the API gateway and the pieces are finished creating, then it actually deploys the code onto the Lambda after uploading it to S3. So let's look at that. Here's my Lambda functions. We'll see if it's there yet. Okay, so it's not there yet, but we can look at CloudFormation and see what CloudFormation is doing. So it looks like it is there. It says create complete. Okay, so this is the initial, yeah, so this is, it just finished uploading this. Now it's updating the stack. So I think we can go back, and if we refresh this, yeah, here we go. So now it's actually doing the update, which is awesome. So we've got our API gateway. We've got our Lambda. Where's our Lambda? Oh, didn't make the Lambda yet. Okay. All right. Here we go. Headline Lambda version. So if it's creating a Lambda version, it's probably got the Lambda created. Then I love this resources tab because it kind of has all the things that we need. Here's the Lambda function. I'll go ahead and open that in a new tab. And here's our Lambda. I'm not sure if it's quite ready yet. It is. Okay, so it looks like the deployment went through on the first try. That's awesome. I'm glad I have my notes over here so I can copy things. Let's try it out. So it does have this fancy link here, and it doesn't quite work. Let's try running NYT. So you'll see this loading, takes a little bit. Remember, Chromium's got to boot up, go to the site, come back. the Chromium booting up is probably the longest part of this. I did play around with the Lambda resources and was able to get it faster, but uh-oh, look at that. It pulled the headline down. That's so cool. All right, let's try that one more time with Washington Post. And again, it's got to boot up Chromium again. I'm actually not sure with running Lambdas in kind of like preheated containers, how that works with utilizing similar Chromium browser instances. I think it's not because it's inside the function of the Chrome, but there's probably ways that you could improve it. I haven't messed around with using layers for Chrome. That may be an option. But look, WordPress. Washington Post worked as well. If we go to WSJ, let's see the result. Okay, nothing. It didn't pull anything out of that outlet info, so the browser couldn't open, it couldn't go anywhere. And if we go into our Lambda, let's see, I'm kind of curious how long these things are running here. Okay, usually it takes me to the right place. Okay, here we go. I don't know why it didn't just take me there. That's weird. So it looks like the first run for this would have been New York Times was 15 seconds. Washington Post was 20 seconds. And then we got our error here, which is a lot quicker, 388 milliseconds. So you can see what this looks like with actually running it, and you know, kind of how involved things are, how much you're going to be charged also. But let me show you something. So we started with 1600. If we bump it up, like let's go all the way. I've never actually seen like the limits of Lambda, but let's see. We will bump Lambda all the way up to the most RAM that it could possibly use. Once this is saved, this should work right away. So we'll try New York Times again, and it's loading, and hopefully this is a lot faster. Remember, okay, that seemed faster. Remember, it was 15 seconds originally. Is this going to keep the same log group? It might not. Usually when you make changes to your Lambda, it creates new log groups, yeah. 6 seconds, well, 7 seconds. So it basically, by increasing the RAM a whole bunch, it basically cut the time in half, which honestly, 7 seconds is not that bad. You probably need to look at how expensive that is. Running a Lambda with that much RAM doesn't seem like a cheap task, but it gets the job done pretty quickly. And yeah, so I guess that's it. I mean, we've deployed it, we've tested it, there haven't been any errors. We went through writing the handler, we went through scaffolding the app. We went through pretty much everything. So now you can take this little application, you can deploy it to your own AWS account, and you can basically work with Puppeteer and do other things. So you can see, you know, it's able to navigate to pages, it's able to access properties, it can click on things. A lot of people can use this for testing. A lot of people can use this to automate, I don't know, anything they would do on the web that they may not want to do manually. They can have it automated with this, and then it can be set up with, instead of API calls, you could set it up with schedules and sending you notifications like text messages, things like that. So you can kind of do whatever you want with this. And yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So anyways, that's it for the video today. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll see you next week.